We're going to continue now with our storm coverage from the very memorable June 18th weather event that moved across the waters Canoe area wilderness. We're going to speak with 3 paddlers who were inside the BWCA for that event. Let's start with the youngest members of our group who we're talking with today. Tell us your name and your age, please.
My name's Hazel, and I'm 7 years old. And I'm Liesl, and I'm 9 years old.
And I'm their cousin, Annika Halverson, 28 years old.
All right. All right. Thank you all for being here and talking with me today. And you are in South Dakota, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Liesl and Hazel are in Sioux Falls, and you're in Berkeley, California, Annika. So we're talking all across the country, although you were in the BWCA on June 18th when that rain system and that weather moved through. Let's start with day one. It seemed like that was the entry date for you through Moose Lake. Annika, would you tell us a little bit about the first day of the trip, and including things like the weather and when the storm moved in?
Yeah. We got up at like 5:30 a.m. from the Ely Motel and arrived at point 16, entry point around 7 a.m. We left around 7:30 for Moose River, but it was already raining by then.
Okay.
I have videos and pictures of Liesl and I hiding underneath a propped up canoe at entry point 16.
Yeah. All right. So a rainy day, and then it just kept raining. Okay. And had you been to the Boundary Waters before, Liesl and Hazel? Had you been up here before?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you like coming up here?
We do, a lot.
You do? Okay. What do you like about coming up here?
Well, I like how peaceful it is.
Mm.
Like, no sounds of cars and just being alone.
Yeah.
I like the s'mores.
Oh, you do, huh? At camp? Yeah. Hey, I like those too. Those are great. Well, and on these trips before, I was talking with your dad, and he said, Liesl, that this was your 4th trip, and Hazel, you've been up 3 times now. Had you had rain before on any of those trips?
I think we had one. Yeah, I think we had one rainstorm, but
Yeah.
it wasn't rain.
Not like this one, huh?
No, not at all.
Okay. So Annika, so you're hunkering in, you're already getting rain, and it's just still early in the trip. What happens next as you get to like your first campsite and that type of thing?
Yeah. Well, it started like, and girls, I think you remember this. It started raining really hard when we finally got to Boulder Bay, Lac LaCroix, like the very last entry or the very last portage point. Do you remember that, girls? That's when it started lightninging, and that's when we had to decide, are we going to go out or are we going to wait? And we waited for a while until we didn't hear any. But there's definitely a little bit when we were on the lake.
Okay. Yeah. Was that scary for you, both of you?
Yes, super scary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is that because the adults are starting to act a little nervous, or how come you got scared at that time?
Well, there were just a lot of big thunders and lightning. Yeah. And the rain was pouring really hard. And the canoe was starting to go down. So we were like, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it was getting pretty intense out there. It sounds like that's the general vibe. And Annika, then you're getting off the water, and it's like, okay, we need to start establishing sort of a secure base, or tell us about that sequence.
Yeah, well, we finally got to one of the sites that we were hoping for, and it was empty, which was great. And that was around 1:30 p.m. We made it was raining so hard. We just strung up like a makeshift shelter. The girl's dad, Peter, my uncle, brought a bug tent that we kind of just like strung up among the trees really hastily and kind of tilted it away from the wind. And we sat in there for, I think, I don't even know, an hour and a half until we shifted to another makeshift shelter. And we sat in there until around 4:45 when we finally had a break in the storm somewhat to set up camp.
Wow. Okay. Was there any thought about this is just too overwhelming? that maybe we should just call it and head back to the lodge or the motel or something? Was that discussed at all?
No, I think I mean, it was pretty miserable, but we all kind of figured it would pass, and we passed time reading Narnia out loud and trying to make the most of it.
Okay. And then what happened that night? You were able to get your tent set up, and did you have a okay night that first night?
Yeah, I think like we got a few tents set up. We were, pretty soaked to our bones, but the tents were dry, which was great. I don't think my dad's, John's was dry, unfortunately. So he had a rougher night, but the rest of us were fine.
Yeah. How about you girls? Did you get any sleep that first night? Were you safe?
It rained till about like midnight, so it did. Yeah, I kind of fell asleep. I mean, around then, but I slept till like 6.
You did. Okay.
I slept till you guys woke me up.
All right. Well, so you were okay the first night. Now, when you wake up on day 2 of your trip, is there a lot of water? Like, it's noticeable that the lake level has come up some, and that this was no casual rain event. How did you feel on day 2 when you woke up at camp?
Yeah, the ground was soaked, and you could kind of see the rock there where the water had gone up a little bit, and so.
Annika, what did you observe that morning with the difference in the lake level at Lac LaCroix and so forth?
It definitely was higher. For sure.
Okay.
But I mean, even that first night, when we had the break in the rain, the girls were doing great. Like Liesl went out, when it was lightly drizzling, and we were setting up camp quickly and caught our group's first fish.
All right. That's cool. What kind of fish did you catch from Camp Liesl?
Smallmouth bass.
Yeah, right on. Okay. So did you then have weather impacting things for the rest of your trip? Or what happened after this first day in terms of resetting, so to say, and drying out and just paddling around?
Yeah, we hung up all of our clothes, and it was like super nice, like barely any clouds, sunny the rest of the trip. And we just paddled around, day trips, catching fish. It was all nice.
Okay, that sounds pretty good. Hazel, did you get to have a s'more at any point on this trip?
8.
You did. 8 of them. Okay. Nice. All right. That's pretty good. And did you then learn later, like when you came out, Annika, that other people had been stranded at some of these entry points and the portages were flooded, and that, people had a much harder go of things, so to say, depending on where they were in the boundary waters, that people's experiences were impacted by the weather, certainly. Did you learn about that later or while you were out there?
We learned about that at the first portage when we were trying to get out a few days later. When we saw the portage completely flooded, we were like, oh man, I hope it's not going to be like this the whole way. And then it was. And when we didn't know about, the Echo Trail being closed down or entry point being closed down until after we got out of there. We didn't know people had to camp in the parking lot at point 16. That sounds miserable.
Yeah, right. And the portages, though, were all flooded when you exited the wilderness a few days later.
Oh yeah.
How did you get across those? Did you float your canoe, girls, or did you walk through the water?
Well, it was waist deep, so they floated us through the canoe. Yeah, they ferried us across the portage in the canoe. Sometimes they would carry us on their backs, but it was mostly really deep.
Wow, that's pretty intense and definitely much different than you've probably experienced in the past. Were you scared at any point, either during that lightning or while you were walking out and having to be floated through the portages? Was that scary, or what type of feelings did you have?
Yeah, There were rapids coming down at us and rocks all around. So the parents would be stepping and then they would go down and I would be like, oh, here, did you break your ankle? So that was very, and like pushing through all the rapids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Annika, how did you handle the portages? What did you do during that time when the girls are being floated through?
I just did multiple trips with the packs, because I mean it was less of a load than hauling people in a canoe. I figured it'd be helpful, and when I could, I would snap some pictures or videos. I just kept my phone up by my shoulder in my life jacket. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You said it was a couple days after the rain that you left. Did you call the trip early? Was it, maybe it's time to get out of here, or was that the scheduled time you were supposed to leave?
Scheduled time.
Okay. So beside the portaging and the first day of thunder, all in all, did you have a pretty good trip for the most part in between?
Yeah, we did. It was nice in the middle, and Lac La Croix, you couldn't see much difference of the water. Yeah. So we were just calm, but yeah.
Just doing your thing. Okay. So when you hear about some of these situations, like where people get stuck at an entry point or they have a hard time, a difficult trip, it's really challenging for them, even a little bit dangerous maybe. Does that scare you from coming back, or do you want to come back to the Boundary Waters?
We want to come back. It was a little nerve-wracking, but we want to come back.
All right. Great. Well, we hope you do. Hazel, we hope you come back and enjoy your time in the Boundary Waters. And both of you, it seemed like you're really enthusiastic and dedicated. And between the s'mores and the fishing, I think you found a place up here that fits. Annika, what about for you? Are you planning to come back and do some more Boundary Waters things in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the day with the rapids was, it was really scary at times. Like there were times I would step my foot, try to take a step, but the current would like make my whole leg wobble back and forth as I'm trying to step, right? Like
Right.
with a heavy pack on your back. And it felt nuts at times, when you're trying to step on a big rock in between all of the washed out sand, between all of it, and not like Liesl was saying, not break your ankle. So I don't know, as crazy as it was, it felt pretty exhilarating, and it felt like, it felt like we were on this grand mission or exploration journey. I'm reading Endurance by Alfred Lansing right now, about Shackleton, and it's not a good comparison at all, but it does make me understand more why people want to go out and do crazy things and crazy adventures and explorations.
Yeah, the things that people can do if they have that mental strength is something that Shackleton really embodies, and is probably quite appropriate, I would say, for your experience being out there, because that was definitely to have it change, the script flip so quickly like that, where you walk in on a portage and now just a few days later you're dangerously floating or trudging through that water. That's a big dramatic change. And then did you encounter other people coming or going, or what was your interaction with people as you're leaving the wilderness?
Yeah, that part was pretty comforting. We all kind of there were 2 or 3 groups usually at every portage point that were all kind of bogged down waiting with our canoes, right, to then again pick up our canoe and put it back into the portage and carry our stuff. So it was pretty slow moving enough where we ran into other people trying to get out. And that part was really great. There's one point where we met a group of 4 older men who had a tradition of going in every year together. And when the current, it felt like it had picked up on one of the portages every time I brought a pack. And they saw me kind of struggling, like grabbing onto any weeds or roots that I could off of the eroding cliffside and like dragging myself up the portage. And these men stationed themselves along this current for me and passed me off like a fairy princess, holding my hand person to person, all the way up the current. And the feminist in me just went right out the window. I was like, yes, please, please help me with this right now. It was great.
Yeah. Wow. So people coming together, it sounds like out there, rallying together through the hardships and dealing with the situation, the weather.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was really cool to see, all these people come together, help each other out, try to crack jokes along the way, keep it as lighthearted as possible to not get too anxious or stressed about the situation.
Yeah. What were the people saying about the girls as they were seeing that there's a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old in the midst of all this? Were people commenting on that?
Oh, they were so impressed. They were like, oh man, these girls got some good grit to them.
Right. Yeah. And that's pretty obvious just from my brief conversation here with you both today. And they're chatting with us in South Dakota. And this story is remarkable. I know a lot of people, had challenging situations during that weather event. And the more we can just keep piecing these together and sharing these stories and talking about how people rally together out there, that when future weather events like this come up, people who maybe are a little frightened by some of the news coverage in particular about it and seeing the washed out roads, people were canceling their permits and maybe some talking about how the boundary waters might not be a place you want to go to. But when we hear stories like this, it puts it in the context of like, hey, people are going to be helping you out there. You're not going to be on your own, even if you get into a bad situation. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I really enjoyed talking with you, Annika and Liesl and Hazel. You're wonderful people to talk with about the boundary waters. I hope we get to have another conversation sometime, and you can tell me how you're catching all those fish, Liesl, and Hazel, you can share your s'mores recipe with me if you'd be so kind. So thanks so much for talking with me. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Annika.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. This was really fun.